This is Nottingham Castle, or at least what we imagine it looked like in the age of Robin Hood. The myth endures. Outlaw heroes, Sherwood Forest, medieval romance. But Nottingham's real story is far more transformative than any legend. By the 19th century, this medieval town would become something else entirely. Not a stage for folklore, but an engine of transformation. What you're about to see are AI reconstructions based on original engravings, paintings, and photographs, bringing 19th century Nottingham back to life. This is the story of how industry reshaped a city and the people who lived inside that machine. This engraving depicts Nottingham in 1742. The population was around 10,000. Wide skies. Sandstone buildings rising along the ridge above the River Trent. Church spires marking the horizon. Open fields extending beyond the town boundaries. This was a market town, not an industrial centre. Notice what's absent. No factory chimneys, no dense housing, minimal smoke. The air is clear enough to see for miles across the Trent Valley. The following views show the town from different approaches across the 18th century. Each captures the same essential character: low density, natural light. A town bounded by its medieval walls, growing slowly within those limits. The River Trent flows past to the south, carrying goods from the Midlands toward the North Sea. But Nottingham itself sits slightly inland, protected by sandstone cliffs that rise 130 feet above the floodplain. This geography matters. The sandstone provides building material. The cliffs offer natural defense. And beneath them is a network of caves carved from the soft rock, used for storage, breweries, tanning. The Trent is navigable this far inland, which means Nottingham sits at a crucial point where river transport meets overland routes north to Yorkshire, south to Leicester, and west toward Derby. It's a market town, a distribution hub. Nothing more, at least not yet. This is the marketplace in 1740. The commercial heart of the town, timber-framed buildings, some dating back centuries. Open space where farmers bring grain, livestock, and goods on market days. The scale is modest. A few hundred people at most on a busy day. Stalls set up at dawn and packed away by evening. The buildings surrounding the square house merchants, craftsmen, innkeepers. Prosperous by provincial standards. But nothing suggests the transformation coming. By 1800, Nottingham's population will reach roughly 29,000, almost double what it was in 1750. And that growth will happen without any expansion of the built-up area. The result will be congestion on a scale the medieval town was never designed to handle. By the beginning of the 19th century, Nottingham, now home to nearly 30,000 people, is transforming. People are cramming into existing housing, subdividing buildings, converting cellars and attics into living quarters. Density is increasing, and with it, a new kind of economy is emerging. Framework knitting dominates employment. Thousands of families own or rent stocking frames, mechanical looms operated by hand and foot, producing hosiery in small workshops or homes. This is domestic industry, decentralized, flexible. Workers own their tools, set their own hours, and sell finished goods to merchant middlemen who supply the yarn and control the market. From about 1810, the hosiery trade runs into trouble. Fashion changes. Men begin wearing trousers instead of stockings. Demand collapses. Wages fall. By the 1820s, framework knitters are struggling. Many earn barely enough to survive, and they have no alternatives. Then, in 1808, John Heathcote invents the bobbin net machine. It's designed to make lace mechanically, adapting the principles of the stocking frame to produce delicate netting at unprecedented speed. A skilled hand lace maker can produce 5 meshes per minute. Heathcote's machine produces 1,000. Within a year, the first machines are operating in Nottingham. Within a decade, lace making is transforming from craft to industry. The early machines are still hand-operated, small enough to fit in workshops, but they require capital to purchase. around £200 to £300 each. In today's money, that is roughly £20,000 to £30,000, far more than most workers can afford. Ownership concentrates. Wealthy merchants buy machines and rent them to operatives, or they employ workers directly in small manufactories. By the 1820s, further improvements arrive. John Levers develops a machine that can produce more complex patterns. The jacquard mechanism, originally designed for silk weaving in France, is adapted for lace, allowing intricate designs to be encoded on punch cards. Production accelerates, quality improves, costs fall. Nottingham lace begins to compete with handmade lace from France and Belgium, not in prestige, but in price and availability. The market expands. In 1831, the first commercial directory lists 186 lace manufacturers and 70 hosiery manufacturers operating in Nottingham. The lace trade is overtaking hosiery. The future belongs to machines, not hand frames. But this growth requires more than just machines. It requires fuel. The canal, opened in 1796, has already transformed coal supply. Before the canal, coal was expensive, transported by road from Derbyshire pits. The canal cut prices in half overnight. Cheap coal means more steam power, more heating for workshops, more energy available. It also means something else: gas. In 1819, gas lighting arrives for the first time. The Nottingham Gaslight and Coke Company installs lamps at key intersections: Drury Hill, Hollowstone, Bridlesmith Gate. For the first time, work isn't limited by daylight. Shifts extend into evening. Production increases. But the infrastructure supporting this growth is crumbling under the pressure. The town is changing faster than its infrastructure can support. Water still comes from wells or the River Trent, both increasingly contaminated as population grows and industry expands. Sewage flows into open drains, refuse piles in courtyards. In 1833, cholera strikes. 330 people die in a matter of months, concentrated in the poorest, most overcrowded districts. The connection between contaminated water and disease isn't yet understood, but the consequences are visible. By the 1830s, Nottingham has become something new. Not quite an industrial city, not like Manchester or Birmingham, but no longer a market town either. It's transitioning, growing, straining against medieval boundaries and outdated infrastructure. The wealth is concentrating. Lace merchants are building fortunes. But framework knitters are struggling, and the displaced rural poor keep arriving, pushed off land by the Enclosure Acts. For centuries, villages had shared common fields, land for grazing livestock, gathering fuel, growing subsistence crops. The Enclosure Acts privatized it, fenced it off, sold it to wealthy landowners. Those who depended on common land for survival had nowhere to go but the towns. They arrive in waves with no skills beyond farming, no connections, no alternatives. The workshops and factories absorb them at the lowest wages. Political tension is rising. The Duke of Newcastle still owns vast estates around Nottingham. His opposition to political reform, to extending voting rights beyond property owners, is becoming intolerable to a population that's grown, urbanized and radicalized by economic hardship. By 1830, the pressure has built to breaking point. Something is about to give. This is Nottingham Castle on October 10th, 1831, and it is burning. And this was not caused by an accident, but by arson. Riots have swept through the city. The Reform Act, which would extend voting rights beyond property owners, has been blocked by the House of Lords. And the Duke of Newcastle, who owns this castle, has been one of its most vocal opponents. The mob doesn't just protest. They force their way into the castle and set it ablaze. The flames consume the ducal residence. The symbol of aristocratic power burns through the night. This isn't just about voting rights. It's about decades of accumulated tension, The Enclosure Acts had displaced thousands. Population had doubled without expansion. Framework knitters were struggling as hosiery collapsed. The poor had nowhere to go. The castle fire marks a symbolic break. The old order, aristocratic control, restricted rights, rural economy is burning. What replaces it won't be more democratic. It won't be fairer, but it will be different. The age of industry is beginning, and Nottingham is about to become one of its epicenters. This is Carrington Street Station. Nottingham's first railway connection opened in 1839. A modest structure, single platform, timber roof supported by iron brackets, waiting room barely large enough for 20 passengers. But look beyond the station itself. Notice what's rising around it. Warehouses, goods sheds, coal yards, sidings for freight wagons. The railway isn't just moving people, it's reorganizing how goods flow in and out of Nottingham. Before this, everything moved by road or canal. Slow, weather-dependent, expensive for anything time-sensitive. The railway changes the equation completely. London is now 3 hours away instead of 2 days. Birmingham, 2 hours instead of a full day's journey. Manchester, Sheffield, all suddenly accessible. Distance collapses, markets expand. What was regional becomes national. Raw materials arrive faster. Finished goods leave faster. Production cycles accelerate. Nottingham's lace, delicate, fashionable, expensive, can now reach London wholesalers the same day it's finished. Within 2 decades, the city is rebuilding to handle increased volume. This is London Road Station under construction in 1857. Look at the scale. Longer platforms, iron-framed train shed, capacity for multiple simultaneous arrivals. The original Carrington Street Station couldn't handle the traffic. This is the solution. Bigger, more permanent, designed for expansion. The railways don't adapt to existing towns. They reshape them. Buildings are demolished to make way for tracks. Streets rerouted. Entire districts reorganized around station approaches. By the turn of the century, Nottingham is building an entirely new station, Victoria. Construction begins in the late 1890s. The Great Central Railway's northern terminus. This is city-scale infrastructure. The station site alone requires demolishing slum housing that had stood for decades. Hundreds of families displaced. Streets erased. The Victoria station we're seeing will cover acres. Inside, vaulted iron roof, multiple platforms, direct connections to goods yards, coal depots, factory sidings. The Great Central Line will cut through the heart of Nottingham, not around the edges, through it. This represents a fundamental shift. The railway has stopped being external infrastructure. It's now embedded in the urban fabric. By 1910, the network has expanded to multiple stations and lines. Working-class housing spreads along the railway routes, the infrastructure dictating where the city grows. This view shows both the old stone bridge and the new iron structure side by side in 1871. The old bridge, narrow, medieval, built for foot and horse traffic, is already obsolete. It can't handle the weight of industrial transport, coal wagons, iron goods, factory machinery. The new bridge is wider, stronger, engineered for loads the medieval builders never imagined. This is the pattern everywhere. Old infrastructure being replaced or supplemented because industrial demands exceed what came before. Clean water becomes essential as population explodes. This is the Nottingham Waterworks Company around 1880. Pumping stations, reservoirs, filtration systems. By 1831, Nottingham's population had reached 50,000. By the 1870s, over 100,000. By the 1880s, it is approaching 200,000. Medieval wells couldn't supply that volume. The Trent was contaminated with industrial waste and sewage. The solution was an engineered water supply. In 1831, Nottingham became the first place in Britain with a constant high-pressure mains water supply. The engineer behind it, Thomas Hawksley. Hawksley designed a system that drew water from clean sources upstream, filtered it, then distributed it through underground pipes at constant pressure. This prevented contamination from entering the mains. It meant water flowed reliably, no pumping by hand, no waiting for tanks to fill. Hawksley's designs were replicated across Britain. He became a consultant to cities nationwide. His work in Nottingham established standards that shaped urban infrastructure for decades. By the 1890s, tramways connect industrial districts to residential areas. Horse-drawn initially, later electrified, regular routes, predictable schedules, a flat fare anyone could afford. This changes the geography of work. Factory workers no longer need to live within walking distance of the mills. They can settle in newer housing developments farther out and still reach their shifts reliably. The city is no longer a collection of isolated neighborhoods. It's becoming an interconnected system. Infrastructure reshapes daily life in ways people barely notice. The rhythms of industry, shift work, factory bells, production schedules become the rhythms of the city itself. And at the center of all this infrastructure, all this growth, all this investment, lace. This is a lace factory in 1865. Multi-story brick construction, rows of tall windows for natural light, a chimney rising above the roofline releasing smoke from the steam engines driving the machinery below. Look at the scale. This building employs hundreds. By this point, lace making has been mechanized for over half a century. The early hand-operated machines of the 1810s have evolved into these, steam-powered, running continuously, producing fabric at speeds that would have been unimaginable a generation earlier. Inside, lace machines run day and night. The technology has advanced rapidly. What took skilled handworkers hours now takes minutes. What required years of apprenticeship now requires machine operation. Nottingham has become the global centre of machine-made lace. This is Thomas Adams' factory on Stony Street in 1914, one of Nottingham's largest, employing 600 people, 500 of them women. Thomas Adams started in the lace trade in the 1820s when the industry was still emerging. By mid-century, he was one of the city's wealthiest industrialists. His factory, designed by architect Thomas Chambers Hine, wasn't just functional, it was a statement. Gothic revival details, ornate brickwork, a building designed to impress clients, intimidate competitors, and announce Adams' success to anyone passing by. Inside, rows of lace machines, each operated by a skilled worker called a twist hand. Twist hands were the elite of the lace workforce. They controlled the machines, set the patterns, and maintained quality. Their wages reflected their status, averaging 39 shillings and sixpence per week before World War I. In today's money, around £250 to £270 per week, the highest of any industrial trade. But they didn't work standard hours. Shift work was the norm. A twist hand and his butty, his assistant, would split the day. First shift, 4 a.m. to 9 a.m., then a break, then 1 p.m. to 6 p.m. Second shift, 9 a.m. to 1 p.m., then 6 p.m. to midnight. The machines never stopped. Production ran 24 hours. The factory never cooled, never went dark, never fell silent. Adams wasn't just successful, he was unusually progressive for his time. His factories included a schoolroom for workers' children, a canteen, restrooms, and even a chapel. This was rare. Most factory owners provided nothing beyond the machinery and the wage. This is the finishing department inside a lace factory. Rows of women, mostly young, some as young as 13 or 14, inspecting, trimming, and preparing lace for sale. The work required precision, fine motor skills, hours of repetitive motion under gas lighting. Look at the conditions. Crowded, air filled with lint. Windows kept closed to maintain the temperature. Lace machines required constant heat between 65 and 70 degrees Fahrenheit to prevent thread from breaking. In summer, the heat was unbearable. In winter, barely tolerable. year-round, stifling. Shifts ran 12 hours, sometimes longer if orders were urgent, if deadlines were tight, or if export contracts demanded faster turnaround. Wages for finishing work were far lower than what twist hands earned. Women and girls might make 10 to 15 shillings per week. Enough to survive, barely. Not enough to save, to plan, or to escape. Child labour was common. The Factory Acts of the 1830s and 1840s gradually restricted it. Children under 9 were banned from textile mills, and hours limited for those under 13. But enforcement was inconsistent. Factory inspectors were few, penalties were light, and the demand for cheap labour remained high. By 1870, Nottingham had 224 lace factories. By 1890, over 500. Nearly 17,000 people employed in the trade. And the output? Enormous. The lace had to be sold. This is Long Row West around 1860. Market stalls, shops, crowds moving through the streets. Nottingham's markets weren't just local. They were distribution hubs connecting factory output to national and international demand. Lace produced in the factories moved through here to warehouses in the Lace Market District. Then onward, packed into crates, loaded onto canal barges or railway wagons, and shipped to London, to Liverpool, and to ports connecting Britain to global markets. Nottingham lace was exported everywhere: Paris, New York, across the British Empire, anywhere wealth existed and fashion demanded delicate fabric. By the late 19th century, some estimated suggest that Nottingham and the surrounding region produced over 90% of the world's machine-made lace. A single industry, a global monopoly. This is Narrow Marsh. The name is literal. This area was marshland before the city expanded. Low-lying, poor drainage, prone to flooding. By the 19th century, it's become one of the densest slums in England. Look at the buildings. Brick, closely packed. Narrow alleys between them, barely wide enough for a handcart. No space, no light, no air. Entire families lived in single rooms. Sometimes multiple families sharing a house subdivided into the smallest possible units. No running water inside homes. Shared privies in courtyards. Refuse piled in alleys because there's nowhere else to put it. Disease was inevitable. In 1844, a government commission investigated conditions in Britain's industrial towns. Thomas Hawksley, the same engineer who designed Nottingham's water system, testified that he considered Nottingham the worst town in England. Not the worst slum, the worst town. Contemporary reports described Narrow Marsh and Broad Marsh as having some of the worst slums in Europe. Child mortality was extreme. Typhoid, cholera, tuberculosis, all endemic. In the poorest districts, average life expectancy was likely around 25 to 30 years. In wealthier areas, over 40. The disparity wasn't hidden. It was measured, reported, debated, and for decades largely tolerated. In 1875, the River Trent flooded. The densest slums, built in the lowest lying areas like Narrow Marsh, were hit hardest. Water surged through the streets. Ground floors submerged. Families displaced. This was partly a failure of infrastructure. The city had grown faster than its drainage systems could support. Expansion prioritized industry, commerce, transport. Flood defenses for the poorest districts came last, if at all. Industrial growth created the problem. Civic response would eventually attempt to manage it, but slowly, incompletely, and only after the worst conditions became impossible to ignore. The riots of 1831 had partly been a response to industrialization and its dislocations. By mid-century, civic reform sought to manage those consequences, not reverse them. In 1852, the Arboretum opened to the public. 30,000 people attended the ceremony, a huge crowd for a city of about 60,000. This was the first public park in Nottingham. landscaped gardens, ornamental trees, paths for walking. Elsewhere, Albert Hall opened in 1876, a concert hall hosting lectures, performances, and public meetings. The Theatre Royal, rebuilt in the 1860s, brought professional theatre and touring companies to the city. The Shire Hall housed courts and civic administration. Together, these buildings demonstrated Nottingham's growth beyond industry, culture, governance, and public institutions expanding alongside the factories. Religious institutions expanded as well. St. Barnabas Cathedral, consecrated in 1844, served Nottingham's Catholic community, swelled by Irish immigration. St. Peter's Church stood alongside the new post office, sacred and civic infrastructure rising side by side. Churches provided more than spiritual comfort. They were social centres, schools, and networks of support in a city where traditional village ties had been severed. Across industrial Britain, reform movements were gaining momentum. The Public Health Act of 1848 gave towns powers to improve sanitation and water supply. The 1875 Public Health Act went further, requiring local authorities to address drainage, sewage, and housing standards. Factory acts continued to limit working hours and restrict child labour, though enforcement remained inconsistent. These reforms didn't transform conditions overnight, but gradually, infrastructure improved, housing regulations tightened, public health became a civic responsibility, not just a private concern. By the 1880s, Nottingham has been completely transformed. Return to this view we saw earlier. The castle still stands, rebuilt after the 1831 fire, now serving as a museum and art gallery. But look beyond it. Smoke rising from hundreds of chimneys, factories spreading across the Trent Valley, railway lines cutting through the landscape, housing extending far beyond the medieval boundaries. The population has grown from 29,000 in 1800 to nearly 200,000 in the 1880s. Almost sevenfold in 80 years. The medieval town is gone. The machine is running. This is how industry reshaped a city, not through legend or myth, but through iron, steam, capital, and labour. The castle that once dominated this landscape, a symbol of aristocratic power, is now just one structure among thousands. The real power lies elsewhere, in the factories, in the transport networks, in the systems that keep the machine running. Nottingham's transformation follows patterns seen across industrial Britain: Manchester, Birmingham, Leeds, Sheffield, Glasgow. But each city had its own logic, its own primary industry, its own character. Nottingham's was lace, a luxury product, mechanised and mass-produced. A fabric associated with wealth and fashion, now created by industrial machinery and exported from a city that a century earlier had been a provincial market town. The machine is complete, and it will keep running until the world changes again. If there's another city, era, or transformation you'd like to see reconstructed, let me know in the comments. I'll see you in the next one.